Hi there folks. So this week apparently the country is celebrating the first man in Britain to have given birth to a child. 21-year-old Hayden Cross has legally been a man for 3 years and has given birth to a child after seeking a sperm donor from Facebook. The Independent reports Mr. Cross, who was born Page, had applied to have his eggs frozen on the NHS in the hope he would be able to have children in the future. But when he was refused, he found an anonymous donor through a Facebook group and put his transition on hold. Because in this hyper-progressive society, we've whittled away masculinity so much that it can be defined as nothing more than a plastic penis. He now plans to complete his gender reassignment to remove his breasts and ovaries. His daughter Trinity Lee was born by caesarean, of course, on the 16th of June, his family confirmed. It makes Mr. Cross from Gloucester the first transgender man to give birth in the UK. The funniest thing going through this article is just hearing the words out loud. His eggs, his ovaries, his breasts, man giving birth. Apparently we're just living in a society where 2 + 2 = 5 now. This all falls in line with the typical progressive narrative of toxic masculinity, and so they try to whittle away what it means to be a man and everything that goes along with having a male identity. They'll often peddle the idea that positive traits associated with masculinity, such as strength and courage, actually belong to women, and that negative traits associated with masculinity are toxic. And one of the best ways to blur the lines between males and females is by promoting transgender ideology. But you might be saying to me, who does it really hurt if this Hayden Cross person wants to identify as a man? I mean, are they actually causing any harm to anyone else? Actually, it can. These people don't stop on an individual level. They keep pushing their ideology to the point where it becomes almost religious, evangelical in a sense. And they'll end up pushing it on their children also, which can have very negative consequences. Dr. Michelle Cretella, who's been a paediatrician for 17 years with a focus on child behavioural health, points out some of the dangers of pushing transgender ideology on children. In her article, she writes about how transition affirmation has become normalised, that children who suffer from gender dysphoria are encouraged to go through with the transition from whatever gender they are to the other gender. She writes, the transition affirming view holds that children who consistently and persistently insist that they are not the gender associated with their biological sex are innately transgender. The fact that in normal life and in psychiatry, anyone who consistently and persistently insists on anything else contrary to physical reality is considered either confused or delusional is conveniently ignored. The transition affirming protocol tells parents to treat their children as the gender they desire and to place them on puberty blockers around age 11 or 12 if they are gender dysphoric. Even the American Psychological Association's Handbook of Sexuality and Psychology admits that prior to the widespread promotion of transition affirmation, 75 to 95% of prepubertal children who were distressed by their biological sex eventually outgrew that distress. The vast majority came to accept their biological sex by late adolescence after passing naturally through puberty. There is an obvious self-fulfilling effect in helping children impersonate the opposite sex, both biologically and socially. This is far from benign, since taking puberty blockers at age 12 or younger, followed by cross-sex hormones, sterilises a child. From studies of adults, we know that the risks of cross-sex hormones include, but are not limited to, cardiac disease, high blood pressure, blood clots, strokes, diabetes, and cancers. And of course, to make matters worse, we need to understand that children are just too young to make these sort of life-changing decisions. 11 or 12 to sterilise yourself? Do children really understand the gravity of that situation? She also points out adults who undergo sex reassignment, even in Sweden, which is among the most LGBT-affirming countries, have a suicide rate nearly 20 times greater than that of the general population. Clearly, sex reassignment is not the solution to gender dysphoria. What's worse than that is that this isn't even open to debate. Anyone who questions this ideology is transphobic and is immediately shunned or worse because of their opinions. Take Dr. Kenneth Zucker, for example, a Canadian psychologist who was fired from the Toronto Gender Identity Clinic in 2015 after he produced a documentary for the BBC on gender dysphoria in children. The Guardian writes, Zucker disagrees with the now widely favoured gender affirmative approach to young people who feel that they were born with the wrong gender. The approach encourages parents to allow their children with gender dysphoria to live as their chosen sex. Instead, Zucker's approach was likened to the reparative therapy, which had the intended goal of curing children of transgender status. He also advocated more exploration into underlying psychological and mental health issues that might lead children to believe they were born the wrong gender. And that's common procedure in psychology. You want to explore the underlying issues that cause the manifestation of the condition that the patient is suffering from. I can't think of any reason why this would be controversial when it comes to gender dysphoria, unless of course there's an ideology behind it. And of course this would make sense, especially where the article points out the transgender community is very scared and very worried by a BBC documentary on how to approach gender dysphoria in children, organisations and activists are claiming. And the fact that these people are putting feelings before facts suggests to me that they are not the people qualified to be talking about this topic. For more than 30 years, Dr. Kenneth Zucker ran Canada's biggest child gender clinic and was considered a recognised authority on childhood gender dysphoria until he lost his job. He believes he was fired for challenging the gender affirmative approach, and I agree with him. Gender dysphoria seems to be the only psychological condition I can think of where you don't try to even look at the underlying issues that cause the condition. Instead, you're told that it's normal and then you undergo treatment with life-changing consequences that there's no turning back from. What's more insulting than that, at least in the UK, is that the taxpayer has to fund this sort of thing. It's even more insulting when the person then regrets the operation. Or take Canada, for example, with Bill C-16. I'm sure everyone remembers the great debate with Jordan Peterson at the Senate. This bill passed anyway, and it's now illegal to misgender someone. That could result in a fine or in jail time. Bill C-16, of course, could set a very unnerving precedent where even criticising the ideology can get you prosecuted in court. So I'll conclude with this. I, for one, won't be celebrating Britain's first man giving birth. Unfortunately, I see it as a downward spiral, and things are only going to get worse. Thanks for watching.